and hope everybody's doing okay. This is another one of my videos for the Take Control series, where I'm offering support and speaking to different people who can help you take control of your fertility and your fertility journey to help you feel happier and stronger. And today I'm very honoured to be speaking to Angela Pericleous-Smith, who is a fertility counsellor. So hello Angela, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me.
Hi Sarah, nice to see you and thanks for inviting me. Hello everybody.
It's okay. And do you want to explain what it is that you do? You're a fertility counsellor, but the other things that you do, just so that people understand what it is that you do.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a fertility counsellor, as Sarah says, and I'm also the chair of the British Infertility Counselling Association. I work for 2 licensed clinics, and we offer face-to-face counselling, video counselling and telephone counselling for people before their fertility treatment, during their fertility treatment and after their fertility treatment. So when their journey is ended, for both couples and individuals, males or females.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for coming to join us. The reason that I think it's really important to speak to you as part of this series is when I speak to a lot of people, the emotional side of going through fertility treatment, and I know myself from going through it, is really difficult, and the support isn't always there, and people don't always know how to access the support that is available. I myself didn't see a fertility counsellor as we were going through treatment, but I really feel I should have done. And when I speak to a lot of people, they haven't been or hadn't planned to go and aren't really aware that either you're there or the benefits of fertility counselling. So I thought it was really important for us to have a chat to really highlight what the benefits are of seeing a fertility counsellor and the support it can give you through going through treatment. So could you just explain how it works with fertility counselling, why it's beneficial for patients to come and see you?
Yeah, sure. So all licensed clinics should have a counselling service or be able to refer patients to an accredited BECA counsellor. As you'll know, if you, like you said, you've already been through the journey, but for anybody starting out on the journey or going through the journey or after the journey, it's a massive emotional roller coaster, and it does have a profound impact on not only yourself, but your partner, your family, your relationship with other people around you, your work, your diary even. You know, it has a profound impact. And being able to kind of access the counselling service and speak to a counsellor is somebody who's a third party, doesn't have that emotional involvement with you, but does have direct experience of the fertility journey and some of the issues that you'll be faced with. And that's your safe space, really, to be able to go. You can learn coping strategies, learn more about your reactions. It could be that you want to talk about your treatment options and explore what they mean for you, how they might impact you and your partner, if you have one, how they might impact your wider relationships. So there's a whole host of benefits, and it's that person and space where you won't be judged. That is your 60 minutes, 1 hour for you. And people, I think it's important as well to say that you can access that on your own or with a partner. You don't have to come together, or you don't have to come on your own.
Yeah, and I know when I've spoken to people before, they maybe haven't realised that they needed it early on in the journey, and I have had people who've said to me they're wanting to save their counselling session until later in the journey. Perhaps if IVF doesn't work, they want to save it for them. What would you say to them about the benefits of accessing counselling at any point in the journey?
Okay, so there are yeah, I would say the benefits is immense. There is some research that does kind of highlight that people who have accessed support and been able to talk about the emotional stresses of fertility fare better for the future in a pregnancy. I would say to access support as early as possible, and it is tricky because some people don't feel they need the support, and genuinely don't feel they need the support. They get that support from support groups like yourself, or from online support groups, which is great. But I think sometimes there can be a fear as well about accessing the counselling service. First off, all licensed clinics should be making you aware that there is a counselling service, but I think sometimes there is fear. There is a bit of stigma attached to the counselling service, that the counsellor might think you're not coping well. And I think a big fear for fertility patients is that they fear other clinic staff will think they're not coping well and can't have treatment. So, for example, if a patient is to tell their consultant they would like a referral to the counsellor, they might be afraid that the consultant's going to stop their treatments because they're not coping, or they've got a mental health issue. So there is a lot of stigma attached to counselling as well, which obviously we're trying to get rid of that stigma, because we're just normal and there is nothing wrong. It's just usually stressful going through fertility treatment.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think people always realise, we certainly didn't when we started treatment, because we didn't know anybody else that had gone through it or had even struggled trying, to be honest. We didn't understand how emotionally stressful it would be going through it. And I think even just accessing sessions with the counsellor at the start of your journey to get some coping advice on going through that, to talk through how you're feeling, because many people, when they reach the fertility clinic, have been trying for a long time. There's a lot of emotions that built up over those years, and then going into something like IVF, to be able to speak to somebody about how they've been feeling about everything, especially if they've not had any other support, is really important. I'd always advocate people speaking to you earlier on in the process. And I definitely think there is a stigma attached to it. A lot of people I've spoken to said, "Oh, I don't need counselling. There's nothing wrong with me. We're just going through treatment. I don't feel like I need counselling at this stage." But there isn't that stigma attached, and you wouldn't. Everything that is said in your sessions is confidential, isn't it? And they shouldn't worry, should they, about that being fed back to the nursing staff?
Yeah, the counsellor should at the very first session kind of explain what the confidentiality is. Kind of usual bog standard confidentiality is that it is all confidential unless there's a welfare of the child concern, which would have to be something very serious, or unless we believe the person was at risk of harm. Sometimes patients like the counsellors to feed back things to the clinical staff, to the rest of the team, which is absolutely fine. That can be done as well. And I think I'd just pick up on what you said there about kind of not wanting to access it and the stigma. One of the things I always say about counselling and accessing it is that, for those of us that drive cars, at least every year we take that car to the garage and get it MOT'd at least once a year. And for a lot of people, more than that, they take it for the regular services, they check the oil and water and all the rest of it. So what's the difference with your own mental health? That's what I'd encourage people to think about.
And I think it's definitely getting more, I say acceptable, but it shouldn't have been unacceptable beforehand. But I think there's definitely more awareness of the need to look after your mental health. And I'd say even more so when you're going through something like this. I think people shouldn't underestimate sort of how they felt going through those years, and shouldn't kind of, they should acknowledge that it's been difficult for them. You know, if they've been struggling, they're just because they don't know anybody else that's going through it, or people don't understand how hard it is, doesn't mean that it's not being hard for you, and you're allowed to feel that. And accessing a counsellor is a great way to process some of that. Is there any advice you've got that you could share for people who are anywhere in their journey when they're trying to conceive or about to start IVF?
Yeah, well, I think it's often a really isolating experience, you know, and sometimes even if you're in a relationship, it still can be very isolating because you might both be on different pages, or you might handle things differently. So your coping abilities are different. Communication is key. Communication with your partner, with your family. And again, a lot of people don't want to talk to family members. I think also with fertility, there's a lot of shame. There can be, or sometimes there can be a lot of shame and embarrassment. And I do think it's improving over the years, but I do think the media doesn't always help, because it kind of paints a picture of, oh, IVF, you kind of walk into a clinic and walk out with a baby, and obviously it's not like that. So I think if you are able to access counselling, that's a really good start. Even if it's you know, the counsellor can help you work on communicating strategies with your partner or with others around you, or how to handle workplace, or the numerous never-ending scam pictures posted on social media, or the pregnancy announcements, all the different coping strategies. One of my biggest advice for people is self-care. And when I say self-care, I don't just mean like your diet and healthy eating and alcohol and cigarettes and such, but kind of self-care of your own emotional well-being. You know, a common thing I see day in, day out is people beating themselves up. That their body's broken, they can't do the one thing they're supposed to do, or punishing themselves, they've waited too long, or perhaps they had a termination earlier in their life when it wasn't right. And this constant kind of beating self up. A very common one is, sorry, I'm probably going off point now, but a very common one is when somebody announces a pregnancy, and there's that kind of gut reaction to that, and that sadness for yourself. And then people commonly beat themselves up because they had a negative thought about it, when they should be happy for that person. So, you know, a key thing for me there is that give yourself permission to have that self-care. It's completely natural to have that gut reaction, and to feel however you feel about that announcement. But a key is giving yourself permission and time. So I'm going to have an hour later on today where I'm just going to sit and focus on that announcement, how it's made me feel, how I feel about it for me. Then I'm going to carry on, because a common mistake I continually see people make is they beat themselves up. They think they should be happy for that person. Then they think they're a horrible person because they had the negative thought. And then they get to the end of the day, and because they still feel the same, see, I am a bad person.
Yeah, there's a lot of guilt that comes with struggling to get pregnant and going through IVF. Like you said, sort of guilt around, is it your fault? But then, yeah, I certainly felt that when I heard pregnancy announcements. And you feel guilty for having thoughts that it's not that you're not happy for someone. It definitely doesn't make you a bad person. It's just you feel sad for yourself. And I think even just knowing that it's normal to feel like that is a big release for a lot of people. It's such a relief that they're not the only one that feels like that, and that they're not a bad person for it. But I completely agree on the self-care. It's so important. I think a lot of that side of thing gets forgotten when you're trying to get pregnant, when you're going through IVF, everybody's busy and you're trying to cover everything and thinking about everything that you need to do, you often forget to look after yourself emotionally as well. So no, it's great. And having some of those coping tips and knowing you're in a safe, non-judgmental space, to go through those is really important.
Sure.
Is there anything else that you would recommend to people who are going through treatment?
Well, support groups like yours are great because, as I said, it is really an isolating experience, and just being able to speak with other people or hear from other people. That I always say no two journeys will be the same. Nobody's ever in the same position. You could have exactly the same treatment, but your experience will not be the same. So that's really important to recognize. But sometimes kind of hearing some of the kind of common reactions or common themes from other people help, so that bit like what you were saying, the normalizing, so
Yeah.
you're not as isolated. And I don't know if you found this or if you've noticed, but one of the things I notice is in the waiting room in fertility clinics, you can have a really big waiting room, and there could be, not at the moment in COVID times, but pre-COVID times, you could have 50 odd people in a waiting room, but nobody would be talking to each other.
Everybody has a head down, not making eye contact as well. Yeah, and I found that the support group, certainly the local one that I do, has been great for that, because people have formed friendships within the group. So then when they've been in the waiting room, they've been able to chat to each other, and they've been there at the same time for appointments or their pregnancy tests, things like that. And they've said it's made it so much easier knowing that there was somebody else there. And I think it just creates a bit of a community, doesn't it? So you're not there. And even though you're all in the waiting room for the same reason, you don't want to make eye contact in case people recognize you, or you don't want to sit and chat while you're in there. And having that support group away from that at least gives you somewhere so you're not alone.
Yeah, and again, even with support groups, because a lot of patients access some support groups online, just take care of yourself, because some of the support groups, particularly the online ones, can become quite overwhelming depending on the topic that's being discussed. So just be really aware of your own limitations, and take self-care and access them as and when you need, because again, another common word that comes up is selfish, being selfish. This idea of self-care and self-compassion, that if you do that, you're selfish. So again, another kind of tip from me would be, particularly if you're a list person, if you write a list every day of your jobs to do, is where are you on that list? Even if that's just taking 15 minutes to sit and think about your thoughts, or some self-care on that list.
Yeah. And just another point to what you've made there about like the online groups, definitely. I think if you find, because I try and keep mine very positive, and I read all the posts that come in so that I make sure that they're very safe and they're very positive places. But I am a member of other groups, and sometimes they can get a bit toxic. So I think if you find that it's like that, it's okay to kind of switch off from it, come out for it a bit for a bit. You don't have to be in there. And the same applies for social media, that nowadays you can have things like pregnancy announcements and pictures. You can be sat at your home and you're not safe sat there away from it, because when you're on social media you can see everything instantly, and it's not like you can shut yourself away from friends who might tell you face to face. And I think part of that is, if you're feeling like that, it's not selfish to take yourself away from it, to have a break from social media, to have a break from things. I think it's about protecting yourself, isn't it? And it's really important to protect yourself, and be aware of, yes, support groups are great, but if you're not feeling in that place, that's okay. You can step away from it for a bit until you feel stronger. And I know people who do that.
Yeah, that's self-preservation. I think I think that's the other really good thing about counselling as well, because support groups are great and some of the social media groups are great, but everybody is different as to what works for them. And I guess if you're engaged with counselling, you know, along with your counsellor, you can kind of work out the things that are going to be valuable for you and help you in your journey. And that might be a support group, it might be acupuncture, or, you know, whatever it might be. But again, with a counsellor, you can kind of work through what's good for you. And just because it worked for your best friend or your work colleague, because again, something else that I see quite regularly is people are drinking the pineapple juice or the pomegranate juice. They're going to acupuncture once a week. They're going to reflexology once a week. They're going to yoga. They're doing their mindfulness, and they're doing so much. People are doing so much. But my question always is, where are you in all of that?
Yeah.
I'll often ask them, you know, what do you do for self-care? And they'll reel off all this stuff. I'm taking my vitamins, I'm going to yoga, I'm doing acupuncture. But actually, where are you in that?
Yeah.
Self-care, and does that make sense? People are so
Definitely.
busy doing all these right things.
Yeah. And sometimes that can cause more stress as well, because I've spoken to people who've said, well, should I be cutting out all the chemical things? And I was saying, well, people get pregnant all the time without that. And if it's causing you more stress, working that out and worrying about everything that you're doing, is it adding more stress to you than just going about your day-to-day life? And yeah, I think definitely, just because things like acupuncture are right for one person, for me, I can't stand needles. So for me, it wasn't. And if I had forced myself to go because I felt like it was the right thing to do, I wouldn't have enjoyed it. I would have felt really on edge for the whole time I was there. And I would say that's probably more detrimental to your emotional well-being than going is. So yeah, definitely you do what's right for you. And it's great because if counselling is there to remind them of that, but also talk through the things that are important to them, it's not about doing everything everybody else is doing, it's finding what's right for you. Because yeah, if you're filling every hour with some, like, I don't know, blending pineapple core, then, you know, when you could be, you'd find more benefit from relaxing and reading a book. Then yeah, it's finding the right things for you, and you can talk through that with them. I just wanted to briefly touch on like implications counselling, just so that we have covered it. I just thought, so you do counselling. So anybody who is looking at using donors for treatment, they would need to come to you, wouldn't they, for implications counselling?
Yes. So implications counselling for anybody looking at donation, whether that's egg donation, sperm donation, embryo donation, whether you're heterosexual couple, same-sex couple, single person, they would come along for what we call an implications counselling session. That's the same for, I don't know if you're just sticking to donation, but that's the same for surrogacy as well. Fertility preservation. Sometimes implications counselling is necessary depending on the treatment. So that's usually donation, surrogacy, fertility preservation, posthumous use of gametes, egg or sperm or embryos, and people who might be considering transitioning as well.
Okay, and the nature of that is to help people work through. Is it to work through some of those, making those decisions, or the implications of going through the process of it?
Yes, so it's to help people really consider the potential implications. So how it feels for themselves, their partner, their wider family, how it might be in the future. And again, there's a little bit of a misconception about implications counselling as well, in that some people think it's a tick box exercise. And what I always say to people is there's no right or wrong answers. It is not a test. but it is more about kind of thinking about these potential implications so people can go away with the things we've discussed, and they can discuss them some more and explore their thoughts and feelings around them, so that they know they're making a fully informed decision that that's the right treatment option for them. So, for example, some of the things we might be talking about is what the current law status is, what the current legal parenthood status is, how that might impact them 5 years down the line, 10 years, 20 years down the line, and to kind of give consideration to these things. And then in some cases the wider family as well, how it might impact or be perceived.
Oh, okay, brilliant, thank you. And just finally, how can people access the fertility counsellor? So all licensed clinics should have access to them, and I know it will differ in each one, but how can they access that where there is a linked one, but also if their clinic doesn't, or they're not linked to a clinic just yet, is there somewhere else they can access that?
Yeah, so the British Infertility Counselling Association, BICA, their website, which is www.bica.net, there is a page on there, Find a Counsellor, and all the counsellors on there are accredited by BICA or working towards their accreditation. And they can access counselling there. Fees do vary between each counsellor, so I would just say have a good look through there.
Yeah, and then in terms of with their clinic, as I say, it probably will differ, but is it a case of just speaking to the clinic and asking for a referral to a counsellor?
Yeah, all clinics will differ, but if it's a licensed treatment clinic, all clinics must have access to a counsellor. The HFEA, so the Human Fertilisation Embryology Authority, who regulates clinics, that they stipulate that clinics must have a counselling service or be able to signpost to a counsellor. So if you're not yet involved with a clinic, but you know you're going to that particular clinic, you know you've had a referral from your GP, I would just ring up and ask.
Oh, okay, brilliant, thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to add as to why it's helpful?
I could be here all day, really. It's just really helpful to have that one person who is there just for you, kind of looking, I know I've kind of focused on people going through treatment, but even if you're ending treatment with or without a pregnancy, again, it can still be hugely beneficial to access the counselling service. So, and again, some research has shown that people who are pregnant after fertility treatment, anxiety levels are higher for the first 12 weeks than people who have conceived naturally. And again, for me, that makes sense, because obviously everything you've been through for the years on end. So to remember, counselling is available then. Counselling is available with a pregnancy as well, or throughout your pregnancy, can be really helpful and beneficial.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And yeah, I totally advocate going to see a counsellor for at least one session to see how it is and if it's right for you, and have a look at BICA if you want to find out any more information. Thank you so much. That's been great and really helpful. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.